On December 16, 2017, the New York Times published 3 videos purporting to show encounters with unusual high-speed aerial craft. These videos were recorded by jets from the USS Nimitz and the USS Theodore Roosevelt, and included communication from the pilots as well as cockpit display data and infrared imagery. In September 2019, the Pentagon confirmed that these videos were made by U.S. Navy pilots and that they are, quote, part of a larger issue of an increased number of training range incursions by unidentified aerial phenomena in recent years. On April 27, 2020, the Pentagon took the additional step of formally releasing these videos. Now, after countless Freedom of Information Act requests, intervention by government officials, and pressure from both the public and the U.S. Congress, the topic of unidentified aerial craft, referred to as unidentified aerial phenomena, or UAPs, entering our airspace has officially been acknowledged by the United States government. The acceptance that UAPs, previously referred to as UFOs, are real is gaining more and more mainstream acceptance. However, we hear again and again from insiders, politicians, and military personnel, we don't know what they are, we don't know where they're from, we don't know what they want. This video is the first chapter in an unusual story that I believe answers those questions. I have been abducted by extraterrestrial beings from the time I was an infant. You may have heard of tales of alien abduction, where the abductees' memories of the encounter are like fragments of a dream, or have been recovered using hypnosis. I have a different experience. For a period stretching from approximately 1985 through 2006, it wasn't uncommon for me to fully awaken during an abduction. It's much rarer for me to awaken now, but it still happens on occasion, and I will explain the reasons for this change in a future video. Additionally, portions of the abductions have been witnessed by others, which is also without precedent. The information and insight that I will begin introducing at this time, and will expand upon in videos to come, is based on the hundreds of hours I've spent awake and completely conscious inside alien craft, also known as UAPs or UFOs, often immobilized, but consciously aware and able to observe. Exceptional claims require exceptional evidence, so let's begin with hard evidence, a handprint left on my bedroom wall by an extraterrestrial visitor. We'll analyze it together. I'll touch on some aspects of an abduction scenario, which I will expand upon in later videos. Over this journey together, we will explore extraterrestrial culture, society, biology, technology, language, why they are here, their propulsion systems, and much more, from the perspective of someone who has spent hundreds of hours awake and aware inside the craft. For now, I intend to remain anonymous. I have consciously chosen to remain off camera and have used software to alter my voice as I narrate these videos. Which brings us to the morning of February 2nd, 2021, when I discovered that an extraterrestrial, what I refer to as the Type 2 Gray, had left its handprint on my bedroom wall when returning to its craft. Even at first glance, the handprint has some notable properties which we'll examine together in detail. First, as we'll see, an analysis of the handprint infers an anatomical structure that deviates significantly from the anatomy of a human hand. Second, the handprint is essentially invisible when viewed in direct light. Third, the handprint was not left in wet paint. I have a 2-year record of photos of the wall, and the handprint was not present until the morning of February 2nd. Fourth, the handprint cannot be smeared or marred using an amount of pressure short of that which would also scrape away the paint. And finally, the handprint meshes perfectly with what I consciously observed during abduction scenarios. I woke the morning of February 2nd, 2021, with some fragments of a dream that may or may not have indicated that an extraterrestrial encounter had taken place the previous night. I couldn't tell if they were a clouded memory or simply a fading dream, so I let them fade away. I've lived in the same home for almost 2 years. Up to and including the morning of February 1st, 2021, there were no handprints on my bedroom wall. When I woke the morning of February 2nd, 2021, a handprint had been left behind. Because I only took video of the handprint the morning it was discovered, I've taken a still photo of the wall, almost 4 months later, to use in this comparison. Yes, the handprint is still there. While I'm not very good at photo editing, I've done my best to make the handprint a little easier to see. I find that the proportions of the handprint are more evident at a smaller size, as you can see here. Even at first glance, it should be obvious that the proportions and size of the handprint do not conform to the human norm. Before we begin to explore how the handprint fits an abduction scenario, let's first look at some dissenting theories. The first obvious theory is that this is my handprint. Some might suggest that I somehow pushed against the wall and created the handprint myself. Here's my hand side by side with the handprint. As you can see, the handprint on the wall is significantly larger than my own hand. Look at how much larger in a moment. We've already established that the handprint wasn't present for almost 2 years after the paint most recently dried. Whatever substance imprinted the hand, it seems to be on top of the paint, not impressed in it, as the handprint blocks the light reflected off the glossy paint. Either mundane option is improbable. The handprint left on the wall and my handprint are different sizes. The paint on the wall hasn't been wet since before June 2019, and the handprint wasn't present for almost 2 years. Additionally, we can clearly see the handprint seems to be on top of the paint, not a depression in the paint. The other competing theory is that this is a hoax. The most likely suggestion is that I applied this print myself using some sort of substance. This would require me having recently applied some clear substance to the wall, and that substance have a property that renders it essentially invisible and allows the handprint only to be seen in indirect lighting. Additionally, this theory requires me to have selected a substance that perfectly matches a lighting environment that had been established 2 years prior. Demonstrated here, it's not possible to smear the handprint. To create such a hoax would require a clear substance that doesn't evaporate as it dries, is solid enough that it can't be distorted by rubbing it, which would have to be spread carefully and evenly on a textured surface in the precise shape of the handprint without leaving brush strokes. Additionally, I would need to be so precise in its creation that there weren't any drips or runs while applying the liquid. While this may be possible for some of the very talented people on the internet, I admittedly don't have the know-how or the motivation to perpetrate such a hoax. As you can deduce from the nearby painting, handprints that appear only in indirect light don't really match the aesthetic of my bedroom. This substantially rules out mundane sources for the handprint on the wall. Rather than simply leaping to conclusions and prematurely confirming my hypothesis that a Type 2 gray left this handprint on the wall, let's first look at the handprint as objectively as possible. The handprint on the wall is approximately 9.5 inches, 24.1 centimeters, from the tip of the middle finger to the base of the palm. I dipped my own hand in olive oil and pressed it onto a sheet of printer paper to compare my own handprint with the handprint left on the wall. My hand is approximately 7.25 inches, 18.4 centimeters, from the tip of my middle finger to the base of my palm. If you use a ruler or tape measure to compare the size of your own hand to the handprint on the wall, you will discover that the handprint on the wall is unusually large. To put this in perspective, the handprint on the wall is in the same size category as the biggest hands of professional basketball players in the NBA. It's the same length as the hand of Wilt Chamberlain and only a quarter inch shorter than Michael Jordan's hand. The fingers of the handprint on the wall are at least 5 inches, 12.7 centimeters in length, as measured from the tip of the middle finger to the line that divides the fingers from the top of the palm, known as the palmar digital crease, making up slightly more than 50% of the entire hand length. By comparison, the fingers of my handprint are approximately 3.25 inches, 8.3 centimeters, as measured over the same span, which is quite a bit less than 50% of the entire hand length. Comparing these percentages demonstrates very different proportions between the two hands. It also suggests similar but separate paths of evolution. I'm confident that the way both hands interact with their environment differs significantly. For most simple tasks, humans grasp and hold things in our hands. We don't carry them with our fingers. Our fingers don't need to be overpoweringly strong because our hands and arms function together to do most of the work. Human hands are proportionately more palm and less fingers, as are the hands of the primates I've studied, because we share an evolutionary path. The handprint on the wall evolved down a different path. There's a strong suggestion that the handprint on the wall evolved to manipulate its world with its fingers, not with its hands. We'll explore this more in a moment. The base of my palm is significantly wider than the breadth of my fingers, with my palm forming a rough trapezoid. By comparison, the base of the palm of the handprint on the wall forms more of a square and is roughly the same width as the fingers. While this may not seem like a huge difference at first glance, the size and shape of the palm, as well as the proportion of the palm to the rest of the hand, is based on an underlying anatomical structure. The differences in handprint reflect a difference in the underlying anatomy, such as the bones of the human hand, that give the hand its shape and operability. The difference in palm shape, the human hand having a broad palm, while the handprint on the wall has a narrow palm, is an additional suggestion that both hands evolved separately. What's more is that our hands are one of humanity's defining traits. We can trace the evolution of our hand through the fossil record back tens of millions of years. A different shaped palm strongly suggests a different biological history, one that evolved separately from primates here on Earth. If the handprint on the wall did not evolve here on Earth, by default, it evolved in another non-terrestrial place. With a hand that evolved separately from humans, it makes sense that if an opposable thumb also evolved, that thumb would have some distinct differences from human anatomy. The thumb of the handprint on the wall aligns so that it's parallel to the fingers. My thumb naturally arcs outward from my hand. Additionally, the thumb of the handprint on the wall overlaps the boundary between the fingers and palm, which on a human would be the palmar digital crease. My thumb is positioned well below this crease. What's more is that it's impossible for me to move my thumb into the position demonstrated by the handprint on the wall. Anatomically speaking, it should be impossible for any human to move their thumb so that it overlaps this crease without first folding their hand inward. The handprint on the wall indicates that it was pressed flat, not folded inward, which once again infers a different underlying anatomical structure, bones or another system, from that found in humans. Human fingers have a crease on the front, or palmar side of the hand, which is aligned with the knuckle on the back, or dorsal side of the hand, indicating the location of the finger joint. This fold is referred to as the interphalangeal digital crease. You can clearly see these lines, and where my fingers increase and narrow, on my handprint. There is no such deviation on the handprint on the wall, specifically the distal and middle interphalangeal digital creases, or the lines in the handprint closest to the tip of the finger and the middle of the finger. You can see how my handprint indents at these creases. The fingers of the handprint on the wall appear to be uniform in width, from tip to base, without any sort of variation where we would expect to find an interphalangeal digital crease. This phenomena does not occur in human handprints. There is a suggestion, however, of the existence of a palmar digital crease, or the line between the fingers and palm. Having only this single break in the hand also deviates from human anatomy. Human fingers are never perfectly straight. Typically, the small, ring, and index fingers curve slightly toward the middle finger, while the middle finger may curve slightly to either side. You can see this illustrated in the print of my hand. The fingers of the handprint on the wall appear not only to be straight, but almost tubular in nature. Again, this is different from the structure of a human hand. There is one additional observation regarding the difference in finger anatomy that I would like to make. This is subtle, but if you look at the index and middle fingertips of the handprint on the wall, they are slightly angled toward the ceiling. This implies an action indicating a downward pull or an upward climb by the hand once the fingertips contacted the wall. If this handprint was simply placed, such as someone pressing their hand into the wall to intentionally create a print, the result would be static or without any implied motion, like my handprint on paper. There wouldn't be any evidence of upward movement or downward pull. The handprint on the wall seems to have been left in the middle of an action. However, only the fingertips of the handprint on the wall appear to be turned slightly upward. The remainder of each finger is parallel to the hand. In a human hand, the full finger would be slanted upward. This strongly implies a different underlying finger structure between the two handprints. What's more is that the tip of the middle finger on the wall is approximately 6 feet 3 inches, 191 centimeters from the floor. A previous analysis strongly suggests that the hand was reaching upward rather than reaching out horizontally to brace themselves and restore balance. If a human were to reach out to touch a wall to steady themselves, they would reach out at approximately chest height. The position of the handprint on the wall isn't congruent with this action. Additionally, the tip of the middle finger of the lower partial print is approximately 5 feet 4.5 inches, 164 centimeters from the floor. For a human to leave this handprint on my wall, they would need hands the same size as some of the largest hands in NBA history. Additionally, their hands would need to function at a high level with significant anatomical abnormalities. Furthermore, a human would need to be a skilled burglar to sneak into my home without leaving any evidence of a break-in, gain access with the express intent of leaving a handprint on my wall, and exit the home again without disturbing any items or taking any valuables. This seems less likely than the handprint being left by extraterrestrials. In addition to the unusual size, the handprint on the wall differs significantly from human anatomy at numerous points. The proportions of the hand, the placement of the thumb, the shape of the palm, and the structure of the fingers. Simply put, this is not a human handprint. My hypothesis is that the handprint was left by a Type 2 gray, an extraterrestrial of average to above average height, and a defined role and very specific task to perform during abduction scenarios. I've assigned designations of type, from 1 to 4, to the extraterrestrials I've encountered, and will look at the various types and their roles in alien society and culture in future videos. The anatomy of the handprint on the wall is an exact match for the extraterrestrials I've encountered and observed, specifically the Type 2 gray. At this time, we won't go into the anatomical differences I've observed while on board alien craft, but keep in mind that evolution in another place will potentially unfold in a manner very different to the path biology followed here on Earth. Staying with the handprint, for a human to put their thumb in the same position as the handprint on the wall would require a completely different hand structure than what we have as humans. The fingers of the handprint on the wall are proportionally longer, as compared to the rest of the hand, than the human norm, and are perfectly straight and somewhat tubular where ours are neither. This difference would suggest an underlying hand structure that is significantly different from both humans and primates. UAPs have demonstrated the ability to bend or break the laws of physics as we know them, penetrating matter, such as entering water at high speeds, or separating into multiple craft before merging again into a single vehicle. From personal experience, the extraterrestrials involved in abducting me do not come through the door, window, or any other mundane entrance. With access to UAP technologies and their myriad of applications, my abductors enter through the ceiling or walls. I have additional prints that I will share, where the extraterrestrials entered the room via the ceiling, traveled down the wall, and left the same way. I'll also devote a future video to examining an abduction scenario, including the immobilization and transformation of the abductee, and the role of each type of gray. The commonly reported scenario of an abductee rising in a beam of light is largely correct, although missing a significant amount of nuance and context. Over the hundreds of abductions I've personally experienced, spanning a handful of decades, alien technology has increased and evolved significantly, just as our own terrestrial technology continues to advance. The visible light from this transportation column has all but disappeared due to their evolving technology. You will notice that there are partial prints lower on the wall. It's my opinion that the Type 2 leaned forward over the nightstand to enter the transport column that would take it through the ceiling. Leaning forward in this manner and reaching out, its fingertips first touched the wall at the 5 foot 4.5 inch or 164 centimeter mark. As it was lifted by the transport column, it reached out a second time, either to steady its ascent or guide itself upward, its fingertips touching the wall 6 foot 3 inches or 191 centimeters from the floor. Generally speaking, if a Type 2 gray is present, it would be very unusual for it to be alone. It's very unlikely that these partial prints are from a smaller pair of Type 1 grays, although these partial prints overlap and are missing identifying details. The Type 2 grays either excrete an enzyme or intentionally coat their hands with a substance before engaging in an abduction. My guess is that this serves a role in keeping the abductee docile through the encounter. I'm very sensitive to the substance and have photos of a partial handprint rash that was left on my chest during an abduction. I'll explain this process when we explore abduction scenarios in a future video. I believe that this same substance interacted with the paint and caused the handprint to be left behind. The transport technology doesn't weaken the bonds of matter in a large area, but only in a specific radius. While the ceiling became permeable, the wall did not. This is why the Type 2 gray could reach out and touch the wall, unintentionally leaving its handprint behind as it did, but was able to pass through the ceiling without leaving a mark. I appreciate the time you've taken to watch this video, and I hope you find yourself thinking about the material. It's my intent that by beginning this journey together with this analysis of the extraterrestrial handprint, that has established my credibility and sincerity regarding the subject matter. I'm intending to reinforce that credibility with the subject of the next video. We're in an extraordinary time where UAPs and the possibility of extraterrestrial life visiting our planet is being embraced by the mainstream media. It's my hope that I can shed some additional light into alien culture, society, biology, language, technology, propulsion systems, and much more, from the perspective of someone who has been awake and aware during hundreds of abductions. Thank you for tuning in. Please take a moment to subscribe, as there is much more to come.